I don't know how many of you out there know what a miter trimmer is or have ever used one, but I got one a couple months ago and finally got a chance to use it, and I figured I'd make a video about, exactly what they are and how they work. So I'm going to make a little wall plaque here. My wife came up with a saying off the internet, and I did some layout on, another program. Actually, I used Silhouette Studio, and then I made SVG and brought it into Lightburn, and I started burning it. And I got about 3/4 of the way through it, and I realized that I had a problem. I had never used these cursive type characters before, and where they intersected, I was getting white spots. So I had to go back through and weld everything together and do a second one. So, sometimes when you're using these lasers, you find things that go wrong when you're looking at things as they're working. So, always plan on doing a second run if you have to. And actually, I did get the settings down pretty good, and I got the exact color that I wanted on all the nomenclature. And I did have a bigger piece that I started with, and I'm just going to cut it down. It's still oversized, but really came out nice. And now I had some walnut that was in the scrap pile that was going to be kindling wood shortly if I didn't use it. So I grabbed this, and I'm just going to flatten it out a little bit on the joiner here, get it ready to turn into a simple frame. And the same thing, I'm going over to the planer, and I'm just going to make the other side parallel to that first side that I flattened. And then I've got a little piece of lumber pretty much ready to start making a simple frame out of. And then I need a square edge here to work off of, straight and square. So now I'm just going to go rip it into some thin strips on the table saw to make my frame out of. And you can see I don't have the guard on there. You should use a guard if you can, but I just can't fit it in, with trying to cut strips like this. So you can see this is just going to be a super simple square edge frame. I'm not going to get fancy with it or anything. So once I got them cut, I kind of just held them up against dropped them on the frame there to see, what size I needed. And then I set up my miter gauge and saw, and both of them I actually set up to be off by about a 1/2 degree. The miter gauge is slightly shifted, and the saw blade is tipped about a 1/2 degree, so nothing's going to fit together right when we get done here. I just kind of did that to show if this is good if you do have equipment that's not perfect, or you're using a hand miter saw to make frames, something like that. So what I did is I started cutting the angles on them and got the short pieces cut. And then I went back and I measured what I needed and went to cut them off. I don't know if you can see what's wrong there, but it was a senior moment there, and big mistake. I had two angles. I didn't have miters on there. I had two angles going in the same direction, parallel. And right about there, I caught it. I was like, uh-oh, let's make some new ones. But that's why you always cut extra parts when you're doing it too. So I had them wrong, but now I just went back and set it up and cut them right. I've got to make sure that I just use a square to hit my spot, because usually I'll clamp a board on there to bank them up against to get multiple cuts the same size, but I was just trying to do this quick, dirty, and they're not perfect. I've got this a little bit skewed here when I put it together. So once I get all the parts cut to size, fit around the frame, I'm a little lazy here, and I'm not going to go back and put my dado set on just to put that rabbet around the edge. I could have done it with a router, I could have done it with a dado set, but I decided to do it with the blade, and I'm just going to take a cut in each direction on there, and I'll take a rabbet out of the back of the frame for the other piece to fit into. So you really don't need any other tools. You can just do it with the same blade if you have to. And you do need some good safety devices, push blocks and stuff to keep your hand away from the blade when you're doing stuff like this too. And those little fingerboards really help. Now it's really easy if you just start with frame stock also that has everything, all the features cut in it. But there it is. nothing, you can see nothing fits together quite perfect. It's everything's a little rocky and twisted and stuff. And I did go over and throw a coat of that Rust-Oleum clear on this to seal the letters in before I do my sanding. And then I pulled out my frame clamping table there that I made years ago, and you put it on there and you can see how everything's all cocked and, you know, not right. So here we go. I'm pulling out my miter trimmer, and I bought this at Rockler a couple months ago. They had the 20% off any tool coupon in their catalog. So I try to grab something every year, and this is one thing that I've kind of wanted since I was in high school, because we had a similar one, but it was a good one. It wasn't a Chinese one back in high school, and I really I knew how handy it was. So, and all it is, it's like a guillotine blade that goes back and forth and cuts. It's razor sharp, and it just shears the wood and gives you a perfect clean cut. Now there are some stops on there, and it does not come from the factory adjusted. And you never ever want to get your fingers near those blades because they are just razor sharp. So first thing I have to do now is go back and set the angles on it, because you can see at 45 it misses the 45 by quite a bit. So there's two little Allen head bolts there. You just have to loosen them up, and then that just turns like a eccentric cam. And you can adjust that little stop there, and you can push that out of the way if you don't want to be on 45 to go past it too. And then there's another cam there you turn to adjust the 90, and same on each side. So you do have to take some time to clean the grease off these things and set them up when you get them. They do not come aligned. You have to, you take a couple cuts and make sure you get everything set right. Do a test cut and, get a good square, and once you get it set, that's it. You'll have perfect miters forever. So now it's time to start trimming up those cockeyed cuts I made, and you just put this in there, make sure your finger's out of the way, and just pull it, and you have a perfect, smooth, no tear out anything 45 there. You can see, you can cut these right down to about paper thin if you take your time. So I'm just going to go back through and, start squaring up one side of each of the frame pieces, and you can see it's just, I don't have it bolted down to the bench or anything here. I'm just kind of, it's just sitting there and I'm pulling it. It does take a little bit of force, but it's not really that bad. And like I said, the one thing is you never want to touch that blade. And you can kind of see how nice and clean it shears it. Oh, it just gives you such a perfect joint. And you can go really thin. Now, I'm going to build a stop setup for it eventually. But for now, I'm just, I'm just going to compare the two pieces, put one on top of the other to do the final cut and line everything up to get them the same size. But I just wanted to show you how nice and clean it cuts. And that's walnut there. And there you can see I just put one on top of the other there to do the final cut. And I put one banked one against the blade, and, now they're both going to be the exact same size. And that's how it works. That rack, it's kind of like a rack and pinion there that just pulls the blade forward. Let's look at the other side here so you can get an idea of, just that blade assembly does move. And it's in a nice tight fitting groove there. And there you see, you can just slice off like one hair, really thin pieces. And the 45s are perfect when you do this, once you get it set up right. And just do one more to show you. So if you're going to be doing a lot of frames and you don't have a super accurate miter saw or table saw or, a real fancy blade to get a good glass smooth cut, this is an option, and it does do a perfect job no matter, how bad the cut is. So I got them all squared up and getting it all set up for my clamping table there to clamp it together. And you can see I did label them so I could play with them and get the grain about the same on all of them. And now I'm just going to clamp it up, and you can see I've got those wedges and stuff that I made for this table that really do a good job at clamping everything square and tight and holding it together. And I do, wherever the glue joints are, I always put down wax paper because, you can get things stuck together as it bleeds out when you tighten the clamps up. Let's feed this up here and put some glue on the pieces. I'm just simple glue, you know, on the corners and put this together. And one thing that you will notice when you do the joints, when you use that miter trimmer for the joints, that they're very slippery because they're so super smooth that they slip around, so you have to, you know, play with them to get them aligned perfectly. And once the glue's dry, about an hour and a half later, I'm just going to go back and do a quick sanding before I unclamp it. It's easiest to do this now. The table holds it in place. And then we can just pop it right out. And that way I know I've got a nice flat square frame when I get done. And I got a bunch of frames I plan on making now, so this is all, you know, going to really come in handy. Now you can see these joints are just perfect. No tear out, no anything on them. They just fit perfect. I think the best frame I ever made, and it's perfectly square too. It's not, there's no nothing. It's perfect. So that tool really does help you when you're framing. And again, this table that I made years ago, I mimicked my CNC router table from the first one that I made, and all these rubber band clamps and tapered wedges for holding parts and stuff. And I use it all the time for things like frames or, you know, anything I want to glue up that's small like this. And it does help you hold things when you're sanding and stuff too. I'll flip it over now and just sand the back a little bit. And, about the only thing I'm sanding off here though is the excess glue that's squeezed out. Trying to get that all off so it'll finish nice. And I did cut down that piece to fit the exact size now. It was oversized before, and there you can see, I think it came out perfect. I just can't believe how the collar of the engraving, actually, I got it to match the collar of the walnut. Now I'm going to go over and I'm going to sand off all that Rust-Oleum and any dark burn spots around the edges. This is how I get my engraving real clear. By putting that clear Rust-Oleum on there, it actually keeps them from getting any sawdust stuck in the engraving as you're sanding them. Keeps them nice and clean. And I'm just going to throw a 1-inch 23 gauge pin nail in each joint in the corners here on the top and bottom where you'll never see them anyway. But these things are pretty much, you know, they're hidden once you put them in there and sand it a little bit. You can barely see them. You really have to know they're there to find them. And then putting them, I haven't used polyurethane, this Minwax polyacrylic on these before. I'm trying it my first time, and I, you know, put one coat on and sand between it with 320 and the second coat, and now it's dry and it's a gloss one. I don't like the gloss, so I've shown you this before. I just cut a Scotch-Brite piece of the extra fine Scotch-Brite to fit on my under my Velcro pad. It won't stick to it, but it will work with it, you can see. And that really does take the break that shininess off of it and give it a nice matte finish even when you're using a shiny varnish. So, and that came out good. And then with everything I've done for 100 years, well, maybe not 100, but I put that Johnson's paste wax on, and I'll put a coat on now, and then I'll let it sit for about a week probably and sand it and go put another coat on with steel wool 4-aught. And then see, now it's all kind of a permanent little sign. I'm just putting some little 1/2-inch 23 gauge pins in here just to hold it together. Don't need anything really fancy for this. I do have like some glass points, but they're a pain to use. This is a lot easier. And then on the back, got to put a hanger on the top there, and got these little metal things that got the zigzags in them. I like to put 2 drops of super glue, the gel, on each side of them before I put the little nails in. Because those nails that come with them, they're really easy to pull out over time. You know, you get some seasoned cycling of the wood and stuff, and the little tiny nails can pop out. So, drop of super glue is a little bit extra security. May not do anything in the long run, but makes me feel better. And then my fingers are too big to hold the little tacks that hold them in, so I'm just going to use a pair of needle nose there and start them with the tack hammer there. And I did actually get a little flat punch and just finish them off down in there. So there it is. You know, it didn't take long to make and came out perfect. A little bit more sanding in a couple days because this, you know, polyacrylic does take a couple days to cure. Really, it takes 60 days, but I don't have that right now. And you can see the color on that engraving just matches a walnut so perfect. I just love how it came out. You know, I played with the speeds and stuff till I got it down to a point where it looked close. And I'm really happy. So, you know, there's a quick sign that I made, a quick little wall hanging, and this miter trimmer does work great. Now I grabbed a piece of ash that I have here because that's another material. I usually use walnut, cherry, or ash for frames. So I had a piece of ash, and I'm going to just cut that. And now I do have it bolted to the bench because I'm taking some pretty heavy cuts. You can see that was about a 1/16 of an inch cut, and it came out perfect, smooth. Absolutely no tearing or anything. You don't have to worry about when you saw it, you always get little pieces that tear out. And there was like a 90 thousandths piece. And then just a little piece of bubinga to play with, because this stuff is really hard and splits and stuff, so I just figured I'd try that. And you can see just how easy it just shears that off. And I did have it, like I said, for the ash, I did bolt it to the bench, otherwise it would have slid right off probably. And soon I'll be making a mount for it, like that pocket jig. Pocket joint jig that I made that drops right into the holes in the workbench to hold it. So there it is. You know, hopefully if you never saw one of these used before, you have an idea what they're for and how they work, and they really do a great job if you're doing a lot of frames, and if you don't have the most accurate equipment in the world, they make it, you know, easy to clean them up and still get a perfect job. Getting near the end of the Christmas list now, and hope everybody out there has a Merry Christmas, and thanks for watching. Please subscribe.